All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is Darius Anucauskas, and I'm the Chief Market Analyst here at Markets.com. And today is Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Friday, the 19th of the September of the 2025. Look, welcome everybody. I wanted to do a little quick video on the cryptos and what's happening with those because that last little crypto video I did was last week. So I thought I'm going to do like a weekly update on this, on what's happening in general. So, look, before we jump into action, let's quickly have a read through our risk disclaimer. So, yes, the content we produce does not constitute investment advice or investment recommendation and should not be considered as such. This material should not be taken as an invitation to acquire any financial instrument or product. I'll give you a few seconds to read the rest. I'm not going to disappear anywhere. I'm just going to switch on something here, an extra chart on my side. Also, just before we go any further, as always, just a quick mentioning of our Markets.com website, which you can always check out for more information about us. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to assist. So, yeah. Also, I forgot. So next week, I'm running a little webinar here on the RSI indicator. So feel free to join. It's going to be a closed session, basically where we're going to look into the RSI, one of the most popular indicators, and we'll see its effectiveness. We'll try to apply it in real life market action. We'll look into different scenarios, historic events, and historic. Um, Happenings or whatever you want to call it, basically like into history and how it worked in the past anyway, and like I said, and we'll apply it on in real life market action on our demo account. So yeah, there we go. You can find a link in the description below. Hopefully you will join me next week. So yeah, look, ladies and gentlemen, the whole point, like I said, of this webinar was to, this little video was to go through the cryptos and what's happening right now with them. So, in general, 5 days have passed almost, and the week looks kind of mixed in a way. On the Bitcoin side here, you can see this is a weekly chart. You can see that the crypto did did push a little bit more to the upside, but it still kind of remains somewhat on the flat side, I would say. We have a strong area of resistance. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So this little barrier, that's the high of the 22nd of August. It's not the high of that week. The high of that week is somewhere around here, as you can see here. This 118,000. So we can basically keep that one on the chart. But the reason I had this one is just because we're kind of struggling with that area as well. But I think that the high of that week, the high of Monday of the 18th of August, is somewhat maybe a little bit of a better one. So we need a clearance of that in order to go further north. By further north, I mean closer to the current all-time high, which is around the 124,300 kind of 65 zone ish. So yep, that's the next kind of big thing here. I think for Bitcoin to potentially overcome that hurdle. That said, I'm not in a rush in a way because again, I think that. The downside scenario is not off the table. However, for the downside scenario, what I would like to see here is actually a drop below the 112 zone. I talked about this barrier before. This was my area of resistance, good resistance recently. So I said that if we clear that, I'll go to the upside. We did. Look, the 112 acted as a good area of support as well, so we cannot really deny that. So for now, while we remain in this territory, I would say I'm just kind of observing the price action, not really doing much. Because on one hand, Bitcoin still has demand and still could travel higher. We're seeing some inflows into the Bitcoin ETF. However, we don't really have like any major catalyst at the moment, so that's kind of my issue. At the moment, other cryptos seem to be attracting more attention. So look, I'll talk about Bitcoin Cash because that one had a really good move to the upside. But look at this. Yesterday we rallied strongly. Today we're wiping out all the gains. It seems like the the upside momentum cannot be sustained. And if I look at the weekly, you'll see that we created a nice little false breakout. So long story short, if we remain below this little hurdle here, the 600, in general, if we do fall back below the 600 zone, I think that there is a chance for this one to actually to drift to the downside. So keep that in mind. For me to get comfortable with the upside on Bitcoin Cash, I would need to see a push back above the 630 zone somewhere around here. But hey, at the moment I'm not getting that. At the moment, by the way, this is the highest point of December of 2024. So that 630 zone, that's what I'm looking at, or 632 and a half, I would say. Look, let's round it up here, okay? So that's my upside scenario from the technical perspective. In general, what I'm considering here and looking at the weekly chart is a possibility of seeing somewhat of a range here, something like that. I'm actually even not even here, not like this. There we go. This 542 is a good area. Let me just jump into a daily chart. Okay, and this is, like I said, this is where it kind of shifts a little bit. So, on a daily chart, this level doesn't look very attractive. This maybe level looks a little bit more attractive on a daily chart. On the weekly, the 542 for 543 zone does look a little bit better. So you know what? I think that it's maybe better to keep, because it's better to keep an eye on the weekly, because the bigger the time frame, the, let's say, if we see some sort of an interesting pattern happening on a bigger time frame, that has more credibility rather than the shorter one, because the shorter ones, happen all the time and they don't stick, they don't carry. But with the bigger one, um, it's less noise. It's less noise and kind of gives a little bit of a better picture. So if we stay below the 605 zone today, for example, then I'm leaning towards a possible range here, and it would be quite interesting to see if next week, going into next week, we see a little bit of a decline here back down. Jumping in back into the daily, but then jumping into Ethereum. I talked about this in my morning webinar as well. We're currently coiling up here and on Ethereum, so we're waiting for a clearance. And look, the prevailing trend was to the upside. So the greater chance for this one to break out to would be higher. However, I'll say the same thing. I'll be the boring guy and I'll say that I need a clearance through one of the sides first before considering the next short-term directional move. So for now, long story short, let's keep an eye on some of these on not some of these, but on these trend lines which are forming this triangle. So let's wait for the clearance of one of the sides of this symmetrical triangle. By the way, it's a very nice, beautiful textbook symmetrical triangle happening here. So hey, it could be quite interesting to see which way this one's going to break out to. Ripple is just continuing to hug that psychological 3 level, and yeah, it's the we're also getting into a bit of a squeeze here, but we're currently testing the lower side of this triangle pattern, and we're basically testing this upside line here. So if that gets cleared, okay, I'm going to consider a move lower. But you know what? I would prefer actually to see it drop below the 2.95 zone right here in order to consider further declines, because at the same time we could drop below the 50-day EMA, potentially attracting more sellers into the game here. Litecoin, very quickly on Litecoin, we're stuck. So I said it before in this in my webinar that I'm waiting for clearance through either 120 zone here on the upside or 111, 12 ish on the downside. If we can get a clearance through one of the sides, wonderful. I will consider the next short-term directional move. Dash, no, I'm not going to look at Dash. Dogecoin. Now, this one is one of the we know that it's one of the Musk's favorite. And looking at the Tesla stock, it has rallied quite significantly. Looking at Dodge, it has also rallied quite significantly. So I'm not like, look, don't get me wrong. This is just a nice little coincidence. It's just that when Dodge started rallying, Tesla started rallying. Of course, we know that there's probably like maybe on the contrary, maybe it's like when there was some positive news coming out from Tesla that Musk is reinvesting like $1 billion worth, or buying $1 billion worth of shares. Yep, we saw Dogecoin kind of picking up pace as well. So look, in general, for now, I would say if I'm looking at some higher levels, then I need to push above the 0.3065 zone. If we do get a nice clearance of that one, this will confirm a forthcoming higher high. For the downside, in the short run, I would say a drop below the 0.2571 here could attract a few more sellers, and then we could aim for this upside line. Basically, what we're going to be doing here is considering a larger correction to the downside before another possible leg of buying, if we hold and we stay above this upside line. Polkadot is, yep, it's at an interesting spot here as well. Basically, Polkadot did have a good run to the upside. We cleared it, and we then drifted back to the downside. So, long story short, for now, how it looks here is that we are maybe forming something of an ascending triangle. According to all the TA rules, such patterns tend to break to the upside. But hey, look, maybe it's going to be the ascending triangle, or maybe it's not going to be the ascending triangle, and instead it will be something of a rising wedge like this. So if it is a rising wedge, then of course, according to all the TA rules, it tends to break to the downside. Now again, if you're not really comfortable with neither of these, then that's fine. What you can do here is, let's say, keep your eyes on this 4.6364 zone. If we do push and stay above it on the daily chart, great. I'll slowly aim to the upside, and I'll aim for that psychological 5 level, or maybe a little bit higher. But at the moment, given that we're really reversing strongly from this hurdle, I'm thinking that there could be a bit of a follow through here on the Polkadot side, and we could end up traveling back to the 200-day EMA right here, or maybe even slightly below that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much. Yes, and look, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree or you don't agree? We'd really like to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. That's the usual thing that we always ask. But hey, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I shall see you next time in my next little video update. Bye for now.